You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story isn't from a hunter or a hiker. It's from Aren, a listener originally from Eugene, Oregon, who just wanted a quiet weekend in the woods. But what they got was anything but quiet, and 3 nights of silence that felt too still, an 800-pound owl that didn't exist, and lights that danced in the sky, and footsteps, quiet but heavy, circling their tent in the middle of the night. Whatever was out there, it wasn't elk, and it wasn't alone. This is the story of Aren and the thing that walked beside the tent. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Aren today. Aren is an individual who's a listener of the show from the Pacific Northwest, reached out regarding some things that they would want to share today. And it's a pleasure to have Aren on the show. Aren, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be here talking with you.
Absolutely. I know a little bit about what you're going to share because you did share some before during your sign up, and this area is a very interesting area. We've had a few people share regarding this area. So, I want to make sure you have the time to share everything that you need to today, Aren. So I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you, and feel free to take us back to when this happened to you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to talk about my personal experience I had. This was in 2020, and it was, early COVID years, and my wife and I lived in Eugene, Oregon, and we had used that time of isolation to go out to the woods and, learn how to forage and camp, doing a lot of camping and just taking a lot of hikes. And so it's a really good time for us in a way because we were out in the woods a lot. But we missed our friends up north, so we decided to book this camping spot up in, I would say, Granite Falls, Arlington area. And we were going to go visit my sister and another good friend of mine because it had been a long time since we saw anyone. So that was later in the summer of 2020. And we had been camping a lot. And so I was excited to go, but something weird happened before we left. I got this, I don't know what to even say. It was kind of like a message or kind of a psychic message that I could have some kind of encounter. And I said to whatever was talking to me, I said, I don't really want an encounter. Just leave us alone, And I am kind of a sensitive. So, I've had a lot of, you could say, paranormal or kind of strange experiences in my life. But I'm not a chaser of them, at least not anymore. I did in my past, and I just kind of want to be left alone now. But I was very much aware of Sasquatch and, growing up in the Seattle area. And, I just kind of knew that it was around, or I hoped it was around. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so we hooked it up to Washington State and from Eugene. And the first day we arrived at this campsite, it was kind of like back behind, it was like a good, quarter mile behind this house. And it was off, we booked it off one of these camping sites you can rent. And it was kind of back in this kind of old second growth forest area. And we pulled up this driveway, and it was like a little packed gravel driveway. We pulled up in our truck and kind of looked around, set up our tents in the driveway, like in front of the truck. And then there was a small campground where we could cook and stuff, and it had a couple logs we could sit on. So it wasn't big. We put our tents up in the driveway. Behind that was the truck. And there was not a lot of room to walk, up and down the driveway. You had to really get in the bushes to get in your tent. So that's kind of, it was kind of important. And then there's just to kind of show, tell people, there's this little campsite, and then off to the left, there was this beaver pond down below, and off to the right was this kind of hills that went up into the Cascades, right? It just kind of got bigger and bigger. And then to the north, there was this ridge. It was pretty high up. I would say about 300 feet high. And, so it was kind of surrounded by, hills and this ridge, then down below this beaver pond. So, we're all cool. We made some dinner. We got there in the afternoon. We were starting to get dinner together. But I just noticed, it was quiet. It was just super quiet. And we had been camping a lot in Oregon. And I thought, well, maybe it's just kind of weird in Washington. I haven't done a lot of camping up here. So maybe there's just not a lot of bug noises or birds or whatever. You could hear a pin drop, and the air was just so still. It was just heavy. And I was kind of freaked out about that. And around the campsite is about a 4-foot hedge of salal bushes. And I just, I was just kept kind of shining my flashlight around just to make sure there's no eye shine, nothing watching us. I just kind of felt weird that night. It got real dark. Dinner was over. And the moon was rising. It was a full moon. Still no sounds, no night sounds, nothing. And we were just sitting and talking, and all of a sudden we hear this howl out in the hills behind the campsite. And it was one of those Ohio howl sounds, you know what I mean? Started real low, and it got kind of higher, and it was long. And I looked at my wife and I said, I think we're not alone. And she kind of looked at me, and then we heard another one. And I said, I know what that sound is. I think there's a Sasquatch around here. And she was like, what? It was probably, I'm going to say, about a mile away, but it was real loud. And nothing has lungs like that. A wolf doesn't have lungs like that. And I could tell, there was something out there. So I was like, okay, cool. That's cool. They're here. I just said, hey, we respect you. We're not going to do nothing. Just leave us alone, And so we were sitting there and just kind of talking about that for a minute. And then we see up in the ridge, she kind of points up at the ridge, and there were these lights up there. And, they're pretty far up there, but the lights were off the ground a bit. And they were white, orb-like lights. And they were moving around. And I was like, well, that's got to be a plane, right? We're looking up really high, maybe the optics or something, or kind of a optical illusion or something like that. But the lights were moving kind of back and forth, kind of zigzagging. And I was like, plane doesn't do that, doesn't zigzag like that. And yeah, we were just watching them for, I don't know, a good about 20 minutes. And I had seen UFOs before down in the desert, down in New Mexico and Arizona. So I was like, well, we have more company, So we just kind of watched the light show, and the moon came up. We watched the moon for a while, and I was like, okay, it's time to go to bed. Everything's cool. So still the whole night, no sounds, no night sounds, no bugs, nothing. So the next day was kind of a normal day. We went out, we did some stuff, saw some friends, came back, and it was just normal. You hear the crickets or whatever they are out there, birds flapping around. We saw a heron fly by. The beaver was in a great mood. He was jumping in and out of that pond. We ate some dinner, we saw the moon rise, and we saw the light show again up on that ridge. And we're back a ways. We're in the foothills, and I don't think that was someone running around with a flashlight. There was no house up there or anything. And it was flying above the surface of the ridge. So we just, I just figured it was some UFOs or something, So we watched that for a while and went to bed, and it was just kind of a normal night. We have a couple dogs with us too, and one is, kind of special needs, and I have a little dog. So we had two tents. They were set up right next to each other. And the one dog needs a little special medication, low anxiety issues. So we just thought we'd have two tents, and my wife snores and I didn't want to be around. So anyway, we had two tents, and, that night went by without incident. But the third night, something happened. We got back, we were out in Index, and we were out by the river and got a lot of sun. And we came back and, we're kind of tired, but we wanted to walk around the area a bit, the area around our campground. And there were a couple trails that one was real dark and had a lot of old trees that had fallen down back there. And there was it was real dark with trees, but there were some old trees that had fallen. And it kind of gave me the creeps. And I said to her, I just don't want to be back here. It feels real squatchy to me. And I'm like, I don't know. She's been listening to me about Sasquatch for years, and people think I'm nuts, but I just know they're out there, and I kind of have a love for them because, they're kind of like free beings, and I like the idea of these beings running around free. And, certainly we're not free. So I like the idea of a wild kind of humanoid creature running around. It just makes me feel kind of expansive thinking about it. So, I've always talked about it, but I'm not a big advocate of chasing them. I think just leave them alone, and, if you come across one, it's kind of like a gift, but I didn't want to come across one out there because it just felt real creepy. So, and when I first got that message before we left, I felt it just felt weird. I didn't want to have an encounter, I just didn't. So, anyway, the third night we came back, we went down that creepy trail. We walked around the property a bit, and we were walking back to the campsite, and my dog, I have a little Shih Tzu, he was all of a sudden stopped in the middle of the trail and was stunned. He wouldn't move. He was kind of in a little fugue or something. And I kept trying to say, hey, come on, dude, let's go back to the site. It's not too far, but he couldn't move. So I picked him up and I said, gosh, is there something wrong with him? And my wife was like, oh, he's probably just really tired. But I'd never seen him like this. We had taken him out to the woods a lot. So maybe he was tired. I don't know. But we got back up to the site and I put him in my tent with a little bit of food and some water. And he just kind of tipped over and laid down. And I was kind of worried, should I bring him to the vet? And she was like, no, he's just okay. I'd never seen him like that. So anyway, we got to making dinner and stuff. And I started feeling real nervous. I just started feeling my anxiety was real visceral in my body, and the sun was going down, and it was quiet again. And I was kind of so nervous that I didn't even want to eat. I didn't say anything to my wife. I didn't want to scare her or anything, but I just felt like there was something around. And I would do the flashlight thing in the bushes and around the back. And I didn't see anything, but again, so quiet. And she was like, we heard the beavers jump in the lake. That was the only sound we heard. And we didn't see any lights. And she was like, I'm just exhausted. I'm going to go to bed, into her tent. My whole body was just vibrating. And so I went into my tent and I was like, well, I had some old, this is how old I am. I had a CD player with headphones, and I brought the CD to play just in case I needed to have some music to go to sleep. And I put those on, and I was just trying to calm myself because I just felt so uneasy. And anyway, I must have fallen asleep. But I don't know, must have been maybe an hour or two later, maybe. I woke up to 3 sounds that seemed like they're maybe about 100 yards away. I'm not very good at like distance, and I thought I was original in saying this, but I've heard it since on people's encounters. It sounded like an 800-pound owl. And I was like, there were 3 exact same sounds, and it cut through the night like butter. It was whatever made those sounds had lungs that I just can't even imagine, like whale's lungs or something. And it sounded like they were trying to be an owl, but that wasn't no owl, okay? And I was just like, I just kind of shot up, and I was like, what the heck was that? And I just didn't know what to make of it. It just kind of woke me up, and something was out there, not too far away. But for some reason, I just put the headphones back on and just tried to like go back to sleep. I just don't think about it, go back to sleep. Well, it must have been, I don't know, another hour or two later. I shot up, and my whole body was in full metal jacket terror. Okay. I was like, my heart was racing. I thought I was going to throw up. I was in a state of terror. And I was in that state before I even woke up. It's hard to explain that, but I wasn't even quite awake to know why my body was shaking so hard. And I was just like trying to get control, myself, and then I hear a footstep, and it's right outside my tent. And it was like really quiet though. It was a quiet footstep. And then like, I thought, well, this can't be a bear, because we did the thing you shouldn't do. We left our dishes unwashed after dinner. And I thought if it was a bear, we'd hear it rooting around out there trying to get some food or whatever. But this thing was right outside my tent. And whatever it was huge, because I heard the second step. And it was trying to be real quiet, but it was like crushing the crushed gravel, the crushed gravel, like how they crush it so it's almost solid. But I could hear the sound kind of crushing. And I was like out of control. I was terrified. And I was like, stop breathing. But at the same time, I was worried like I was going to throw up. I mean, I was so scared. And my heart was beating so fast. I'm sure whatever was out there heard it. So I was trying to like breathe real quiet and not make any more sounds. And then I heard another step, and it was just kind of like going to the right of my tent. And I just knew whatever this was freaking huge, because the crunch took a long time to crunch. You know what I mean? Of the footstep. So at that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna throw up here, because my body was just shaking. And I grabbed my backpack and was like rooting for some Pepto-Bismol or something. And I heard it one more step. And then the next thing I know, I'm serious. Next thing I know, I woke up the next morning. I don't remember passing out. I'm not a person who's ever passed out in my life. I woke up the next morning, and I don't even know like how that happened. So I went out of my tent. I didn't say anything at first, but I tried to kind of stomp around outside my tent to see if I could make that sound, and I couldn't make that sound with my boots. So whatever was out there was walking on 2 legs. Must have been pretty freaking huge to make that sound, because of the packed gravel. So I told my wife, I said, I had an experience last night, but let's just start packing. Let's go. And so we got all our stuff in the car, and we took off. And then I kind of told her what happened. And so that was kind of like that. And, I remember that day so well because as we were driving back to Eugene, it was the day of the big fire down there, of the holiday farm fire. I could see the smoke in the distance. And I went from like, it was kind of a terrifying experience I had that night into a very terrifying experience in Eugene and in that area down there. So I didn't really process it for a while because we went into like 2 weeks of danger, from that fire that was happening. And so that was kind of it. But I will say about 2 years ago, so what was that, in 23, I was talking to a buddy of mine up in Washington, and we had since moved up here to Washington State. And I was talking to him, and he asked me, do you know about Bigfoot? And I was like, oh, yeah. He says, I listened to the Bigfoot podcast. And I was like, yeah, I do too, And he said, have you ever had an experience? I said, well, I kind of think I did, I can't 100% say I did, but I told him about it. I told him the area. And he said, he kind of looked white. And he said, my buddy is a hunter, and he goes up in that area, and he's run across a family twice up there. And he won't tell me where, because he wants everyone to leave him alone, but he's run across a family, like, person to person up there. So I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense then, because I can't figure out what else would be that big that came off the hills, because they couldn't walk up the driveway. And so I think it was a Sasquatch. I do. Especially if you kind of put everything together, the noises, the silence, and that just feeling of being watched and stuff. So that was my first experience. And I'll stop there for a sec if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Aren. That was, man, I can't imagine going through that. I don't know how you did it. I definitely have some questions for you. Did your wife experience anything that night at all?
No, because she just passed out. She was tired, sleep. Her dog was also on an anti-anxiety medication, so that dog was asleep. My dog was asleep. My dog was like down for the count, so it was just me.
Gotcha. And it sounds like you left extremely quick the next morning, but any footprints at all, or maybe markings on the truck windows that you noticed at a later time?
Gosh, I didn't even look.
Okay.
There's no footprints because it was that packed gravel, there were no footprints that I could see either.
What CD were you listening to when you were trying to go to bed?
It was probably like a flute, like a Japanese flute.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. It's pretty relaxing, right?
Yeah, I was trying to relax. I just felt uneasy there. I really did.
What did you have for dinner that night of, I guess, the third night?
We had a couple steaks.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Were all 3 nights kind of meat-based, like the steak meal?
Yeah, we're big meat eaters.
That's cool. Yeah. So you were definitely making some delicious smelling smells for a creature or Bigfoot who is totally into eating meat. And I know there's going to be so many comments after that statement. No, Bigfoot eats plants. Nah, you get it, guys. There's a weird thing, though. It seems like in most encounters, they're drawn in. There's like the campers will be cooking bacon. I've noticed that pattern. It's very weird. But yeah, steak is, there you go. That would do it. You mentioned coming across one is a gift. What can you explain why you have that thought process of why you think coming across one is a gift?
Well, for me, it would be. But, thinking that and then having that experience, and I can't say 100% it was, but I'm thinking it's about 98%. But I'm kind of the, mind that these are kind of extra special beings. And, in the First Nations people say that Sasquatch has real strong medicine. And if you have an experience of that, it's, they have very strong medicine of truth, and I just think that's pretty cool. I have a lot of respect for them, and I never want to I would never want to be intrusive to these beings, because I do believe that they need to be left alone. And I just think that it would be a very powerful spiritual experience. And I will say too, as I mentioned, I am a sensitive, for better, for worse, mostly for worse, but I've never come across anything with that kind of energy in my life. And I used to do work with, how would I even I don't want to even get too woo-woo, because I don't want people to think that we're totally into the woo-woo. But I used to do some medicine work and would do some spirit work, and back in the day, and I came across a lot of stuff, for good or for bad. And I came across, when this energy was right next to me, I felt like it was almost like a reverse energy of anything I've ever experienced, like a reverse energy of human. It was like a wild energy, and that may sound crazy, but I've never come across anything that felt like this. And I'm a big feeler, and I can, feel places, I can feel beings, I can feel things. I've never felt anything like this before.
See, I think that's incredible. And it's really cool because, yeah, I believe there are some individuals that have the ability to sense energy, and different cultures and religions, and there's so many different ways to say what that is, right? But I think that is an actual thing in people. And also, I just need to get on a soapbox for a little bit. I swear, if there's one thing I get accomplished in the next 20 to 25 years, it's that I wipe the phrase woo-woo or woo out of the community. Seriously. So because the way that I do it is, I think it's just, we need to take everything that is happening to people and consider it, right? And not just, totally just kick it to the side like, oh, it's too crazy or it's too freaky. No, there's stuff we don't understand, and science doesn't understand it either. And hopefully we will eventually, but man, it gets to me, It's like, just people are experiencing some weird stuff, and we have got to give it credence. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I respect that, because I can't help that I've had these experiences in life, and
right.
Just a lot of stuff we won't get into, but some of them I didn't necessarily like at all. I'll tell you that. But I do believe that we've lost as humans, or whatever we are. I have my own theory about that, but I think we've lost a lot of our instincts,
mm-hmm.
a lot of our kind of instinctual body. We've lost our connection with nature to a very large degree, to a devastating degree. And that these beings, whatever they are, if they're the original beings here, and we're kind of more of a mix, or vice versa, I think they do have more gifts. And, I think they do have more senses that we have somehow, maybe due to our what do you call that, conditioning or whatever we've shut down over the century, whatever.
Now, after you had this 3-night experience, did you find that, did anything out of the ordinary start happening afterwards, like when you got home, or did your senses become affected in any way that you realized or anything like that?
We went right into that big fire situation down.
True.
And gosh, like half of Oregon was on fire. So, like I said, I didn't have a lot of chance to really process that, but I did write it down, and I didn't really get back to it for a little bit. Yeah.
I've mentioned a few times on the show, but I'll mention it again just in case anyone has experienced. But I think that sometimes I think based on, what people tell me is, I think that sometimes when an individual is in an encounter like this, or maybe in an area where there are Sasquatch, it almost maybe unlocks something in the person. I don't know. I'm still kind of working through it, but it is another pattern that I've found that has kind of come up in multiple encounters over the years. It's very, very strange. So something I'm still working through. After this, when you're to the point, you're past the fires, you're processing everything through, you're like, what happened? Did you ever at any point be like, oh, I wonder if this exact area has also had other things happen in it? Maybe I look on, BFRO or the Bigfoot Mapping Project to see if other things have happened there?
I think there have been some on BFRO. I think there's some things up in, Granite Falls area. I think it's pretty active up there. I don't, BFRO doesn't seem like it's updated a lot. I actually contacted the owners of the land and said, hey, I think I had an experience there. He was like, oh, it's just some elk or something. And I said,
yeah,
if elk walk 2 feet and, one's on top of each other, maybe, but it was on 2 feet. And he was like, well, it's just some elk, so he didn't want to get into it. Yeah. So I had it, I grew up there. We had a cabin up in, near Machias area, a little bit further than Machias in between Machias, Granite Falls area. And so we had a lot of land that I would walk around when I was a kid. And I always felt like there was something up there, but I didn't know, and that was a long time ago. I'm in my 50s now, but yeah, I just, I kind of grew up knowing there was something out there.
The other thing I wanted to ask you before we continued was when you lived down in Eugene, did you ever hear of any Bigfoot related things happening down there?
Well, we had a couple weird experiences. I can kind of go through those pretty quick.
Okay.
One of the areas you talk about a lot up at Salmon Creek and out of Oakridge. Yeah. So, this was during that same year probably, or maybe it was the year after, I don't know. But I got a message, one of those messages, quote unquote, to go to Salmon Creek. And I was like, I don't even know where that is. So I had to look it up. And we found that it was out near Oakridge. Okay, cool. So we went out there. And whenever I get a message, I just do it, because usually the messages have always turned out really good for me in life. So we went out there and we were walking down the trails and stuff. And there was this one area where it's just super creepy. I felt like super creeped out, and there was a smell. It was really, really strong. And it smelled kind of like a horse, but maybe some manure. But there was no horses around there. Like we were back on the river, on the creek or whatever. And I just kind of like brushed it off, and then we came back on that same trail, and I kind of smelled it again, and I was like, well, maybe it's a dead animal or something, but I just couldn't get out of there fast enough, if that makes any sense. So I don't know if it was in the exact area that we walked by the first time, but I did feel a little bit uneasy on that particular visit to Salmon Creek. And then the other experience we had in Oregon that was significant was we were out near Mary's Peak area, near the coast, in the coastal range. And we were camping nearby. We decided to go to Mary's Peak, which is kind of like a little mountain. And I was doing some foraging, and I was working on getting some Devil's Club. And my wife took her dog, up further to explore the trail up above where I was working on the Devil's Club. And she got off the creek. She got up there a ways, and next thing I know, she's coming down the trail, kind of white face, and her dog was like running down. And I said, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know, but we hit something up there, and we were told not to come up any further. Like, we were not to go any further. The dog wouldn't move, and I just got kind of hit." And I said, "Okay, let's get out of here." And so, I had just finished with my little forage, and we got back into the truck. And she was like, "I feel sick. I feel like I have a headache, and I feel really out of it." And I said, "What exactly happened?" She's like, "I don't know. We just couldn't go any farther. Like, the dog stopped, and like I was told, we do not go any further." And so I said, "Okay, let's get out of here." So we went back to the campsite, and I said, I wonder if you got hit with some, it's just a theory, but that some of that infrasound, because it sounds like something was telling you not to proceed. And she had a headache, and she was kind of nauseous that whole day. So I did look up Mary's Peak on BFRO, and yes, there have been experiences up there. So I think she had her experience that it was kind of a humbling experience for her there. Yeah.
Absolutely not surprising. Especially, I've heard multiple interviews have brought up the Salmon Creek area of Oakridge. There's even stuff documented back to the 70s, I think, in John Green's file. But thank you for sharing that. I think that was something that you hadn't even planned on bringing up, correct?
The Mary's Peak experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That was weird. That was really weird. So we don't know what that was, but she was told not to proceed. And she got the message, and she was like white as a ghost coming down that hill on that trail. So we go out in the woods a lot and have not had any weird experiences up here. We live in north of Seattle, near Skagit County, and we go out in the foothills a lot out there. And I'm learning that it's actually not really safe to go out there. There's a lot of weird instances with humans out there. So we don't go out as much as we used to, but we do go out, up in Whatcom County and stuff. So haven't had experience like that since. But I have a friend who had an experience down in Montesano, a up-close experience, and I can tell you about that too at some point. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. You said, was that Montesano? Is that Washington?
Yeah, it's in Washington, southwest Washington. Kind of a little bit south of the peninsula. There's a lot of logging out there. And so this is the last story I have. Actually, my niece, this is another, just a little side thing. I can't tell her story, but my niece grew up visiting her grandparents in the woods, and she would get visited as a child by the monkey man, several times. Yeah, so she has her own story, but I will say I believe her, and I just know these things are true. I know that they're out there. So, because I have another friend who had an experience down in Georgia that was like just absolutely terrifying story, but I can't tell her story either. But she saw him right up close, right outside her house, like kind of creeping around her house and stuff. So, but this friend of mine down in Montesano. Okay, so he owns this. He's not with us anymore, but he owned this patch of land. He had a house on it, and he was a prayer man, a Lakota prayer man, and he had a ceremony on his land. And there was a whole bunch of people that came, some from South Dakota, and some people from Washington came, and it was a four-day ceremony. And I was there on his land as one of the cooks. I was cooking for the people, and I was cooking in this little barn that he had. So I know his property, and I know what he's talking about when he told a story. And he told a story to my closest friend at that time. She's no longer with us either, but this guy would not tell. It was a man of few words. Let's put it that way. He was very, he didn't talk much. And he was kind of a serious man. He was a prayer man, and he was very devoted to his spirituality. So anyway, and this barn, this little like shed or whatever that we cooked in was, I don't know, let me think here, 100 feet from his house. I don't know, something like that. So he had an experience after the ceremonies were done. And we all had experiences at that ceremony. But after that was done and over maybe, I don't know, within that year, he one day was at his breakfast table having his coffee, and he looked out toward that shed, and there was a 10-foot Sasquatch just looking right at him, just looking straight through that window at him. And they looked at each other for a while, and my friend, he just kind of nodded to him, and the Sasquatch kind of pushed off from the shed and just slowly walked up this hill that's in the backyard of his property. And so he saw it right up front. And he's not much for reaction, but he did tell that story. And if he told it, it's true. And he would also put people up on that hill in Humblecha ceremony, which is the Vision Quest ceremony. And I have a friend who he put up on the hill for that 4-day ceremony up there. And she said that when she was in that ceremony up there by herself, she could hear the Sasquatch sing. She called it in, and she was just praying, please don't come and visit me. But she said they were all around during her ceremony. So yeah, that was that's a secondhand story, but I knew these people, and they were people I trust very deeply. So
we had a little bit of a blip when you had shared what she called the Sasquatch singing. Could you repeat that, whatever she called it, please?
Oh, she just, instead of saying that she heard them, howling, this woman said that she heard them singing.
Okay.
And, she knew what they were, and she just prayed, please don't come and see me. Like I just, she was up there in the dark for 4 nights, right? So wow. She didn't want to be terrified, but they're up there. Yeah, they're out there.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I'm looking on a map at that area, and it's not too far from like Capitol State Forest, which is known for a lot of activity, and also, you've even got Chehalis around the corner. Although looks can be deceiving on maps. Let's see. Okay, it's about an hour away, so not too bad. Wow, man, thank you for sharing that secondhand account as well. No doubt that the state of Washington has activity all over the place, and this is just some more pieces of evidence that you can add to the long list of things happening in that state. Would you ever want to have a visual sighting yourself if you were able to have that, or is what happened that night enough for you?
I wouldn't mind it because I'm always up for an experience, whether it's like good or bad, but I felt a little vulnerable. I felt vulnerable for some reason. Like if I was out hiking and happened to see a Sasquatch, or I would love to see it for the experience, but I would definitely hightail it out because I do want to be very respectful, and I'd probably be scared, but I'm up for the experience, but I'm not going to seek that experience, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. So what I take from that is you're not the kind of person that's like, okay, I'm going to take a weekend off, go to a hot zone and start banging on trees. No, that's not going to be you, right?
I don't know. That just doesn't seem right to me.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I'm not someone, I'm not judging people. I just, I kind of want to be left alone. So I don't want someone like stalking me, so I wouldn't want to do that. I really like the idea of them being free and being left alone.
It's interesting. I've found it, and I don't go out all the time, but I have found that if you just go out and you hang out and you just chill out there, that's a lot of the times when the stuff can happen, when you just kind of chill out and let whatever happens. So it's kind of interesting.
Man, I got one more experience I had, and just to add to your, and I forgot about this, but could I share really quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So we were out, we went out past that Oakridge area. I forgot for a minute, but we went out past the Oakridge area a bit, and I was looking for this waterfall off the highway, and I thought we had found it, but we parked, and I saw this little trail, and I said to my wife, I'm just going to go up this trail and see if I can hear anything. So I think I'm hearing something, and maybe if I hear it, I can, I'll call you and you can come up. We can find this waterfall. Well, I was going up this trail. It was a little bit icy. And I was out there probably about a quarter mile, and I heard a whistle on one side of the trail. And I thought, must be a bird. It sounded like a human whistle. Then I heard a whistle on the other side of the trail. And I was like, okay. And I kept on walking. And then I heard another, like a real kind of low whistle. And then I heard it on the other side of the trail again. And I said, okay, y'all, I'm leaving now. I hear you, and I don't want to be in your space. I'm leaving. And just then I hear my wife say, calling my name really, really loud, and said, come back, come back. And so I just kept saying, okay, I'm leaving. Please just let me be. I'm going to let you be. I'm leaving. Because I've heard about these whistles, right? And that they were like walking with me and whistling on both sides. That kind of freaked me out. And so I got back to the car, and she was like, something, I just knew I had to call you back. I knew something wasn't right. And I said, yeah, someone was tracking me out there and whistling both sides of the trail. And I just couldn't get out of there fast enough. And so we just kind of sped off. And I kind of forgot about that experience too. But yeah, that was out there in that area.
Ooh, that's some creepy stuff. Was that Salt Creek Falls?
I think that might have been. I can't be sure, but that sounds kind of familiar.
Okay. That's weird stuff though. Yeah.
I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it, but I went up this trail and then I started having those whistles on both sides. Yeah. it was Salt Creek. Yeah.
Okay.
Were there been experiences up there too?
I have heard a few things from that area. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
really, really, you could say that about anything in any area in the Willamette National Forest is what I'm finding out. And I mean, the whole Pacific Northwest, but I've pretty much only gone to that area so far. Just some really interesting things you've shared tonight. And I just want to thank you for coming on to share those. It's cool to hear more things from the Granite Falls area of Washington and other places as well. I just want to say thank you for coming on, Aren, to share what you experienced over the years.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Keep doing your great work. I enjoy every episode.
I appreciate that. And if if anything else ever happens, feel free to you've got my contact info, and always feel free to send my info out to anyone you might know that needs a place to talk as well. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you truly for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Aren's story is one that lingers, not just because of the gravel crunching footsteps or the white orbs dancing above the ridge, but because of the deep feeling that was carried that they weren't alone. So huge thanks to Aren for opening up and sharing such a powerful and vulnerable experience with us. If this one stuck with you, please consider subscribing to us on YouTube, hitting the bell icon, and sharing this episode with a friend who's into Sasquatch, a good campfire mystery, or just weird things in the woods. And hey, if you've had an encounter of your own, especially in the Pacific Northwest, please shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your story. And also mark your calendar. Sasquatch Summerfest is coming up July 11th through the 12th in Oakridge, Oregon. And Bigfoot Society listeners can grab a 2-day pass for the price of a 1-day admission using code BFS at checkout. Tickets are over at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com, so don't miss it. And thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your instincts, and remember, some gifts come quietly in the middle of the night.